Sign it. If you don't, we will stop the surgery." Those words echoed through the ICU hallway while my daughter was breathing on a machine. I stood frozen, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold the pen. And then, at that exact moment, my phone vibrated, a short video sent anonymously. Her husband clinking glasses on a yacht, smiling as if the funeral were already over. I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything. I took one step back, slipped the pen into my pocket, and activated something Marcus had never known existed. If you're still listening right now, where are you tuning in from? Leave me a comment to let me know, and tap like so this story can reach more people, because what's about to happen is not for the faint of heart. My name is Ethan Caldwell, 71 years old. I've spent my entire life in finance, accustomed to cold numbers and decisions made in seconds. I've signed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars without my hand trembling once. Yet there I was, outside the ICU at Cedars-Sinai, faced with a single signature that could save my daughter's life, and my hand betrayed me. Not because I was afraid of money, but because I understood all too well. Some people use time as a weapon, and they kill very patiently. I flew from Chicago to Los Angeles on a red-eye so rushed I didn't even bring a heavy coat. When I walked into the hospital, the familiar smell of disinfectant mixed with the steady beeping of heart monitors, like a wordless countdown. Lily, my daughter, was lying there, heartbreakingly small, a breathing tube in her mouth, her skin paler than the last time I'd seen her at Sunday dinner 2 weeks earlier. On the chair meant for family members, there was no handbag, no coat, no sign of a worried husband. The empty chair felt like an accusation. I asked the nurse on duty, "Where is her husband?" The young woman looked at me, then at the monitor, then down the hallway, as if the answer were hanging somewhere in the air. "He's praying, sir." The words were perfectly delivered, but her eyes avoided mine. I nodded as if I believed her. I learned long ago that when someone lies, they often make it sound too neat. I stepped into the hallway and called Marcus. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling in the way of a man trying to sound devastated. But behind it was something he couldn't hide. Bass-heavy music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. I didn't need to close my eyes to picture the scene. "Where are you?" I asked. "At the chapel," he answered immediately, without a second of hesitation. I stayed silent. The silence stretched just long enough for him to grow uneasy. Then I hung up. The lie had named itself. A doctor hurried out of the consultation room and called Marcus's name. "We need the husband's signature to proceed with emergency surgery," he said urgently. "Without it, the risk increases by the minute." I told him I was the patient's father, that I was willing to sign any financial responsibility required. The doctor looked at me, weighing it. "Legally, we need the spouse's signature," he repeated. I understood. This system runs on signatures, not love. I called Marcus again. This time he answered faster. "The doctors are waiting," I said. "You need to come now." He hesitated, then said something that sent a chill through me. "Let me check with a lawyer about the risk first, Dad." Risk. His daughter was on a ventilator, and he was talking about risk. I said nothing more. I ended the call, knowing in that moment I was standing at a fork in the road. One path was screaming, begging, pleading with him to come. The other was accepting the truth. Marcus wasn't coming because he was waiting for a different outcome. I went back to the nurse's station and signed every financial guarantee as the responsible party. I called my attorney, Naomi Price. Naomi had worked with me for more than 20 years. She knew me well enough to hear my state of mind from my voice alone. "Naomi," I said, "I need you to do 2 things at once. First, make sure the surgery proceeds immediately. Second, start tracking everything related to Marcus Hale. finances, location, loans. She didn't ask why. She asked only one question. How far do you want to go? I looked through the glass into the ICU room, where my daughter lay motionless. Far enough that there's no way back for him, I said. While I waited, my phone vibrated again. The video appeared on the screen. Marcus, his white shirt unbuttoned, standing on the deck of a brightly lit yacht. He clinked glasses with a blonde woman, laughing loudly, the sea breeze tossing his hair like a travel commercial. I didn't need the sound to understand. This wasn't prayer. It was a party. A party thrown while his wife lay between life and death. I forwarded the video to Naomi. "Marina," I said. "Wedding gift yacht," she replied almost instantly. "I'm tracking it. Do you want to confront him directly?" I looked at the pen in my hand, the pen I couldn't hold steady just minutes ago. I set it down on the counter. "No," I said. "Not yet. Close the exits first." Time in the hospital moved like thick syrup. Every beep of the monitor felt like it was tapping against my temple. I thought about Lily as a child, about afternoons picking her up from school, about how she used to grip my hand when crossing the street. I thought about the day Marcus first walked into our home, polite, measured, eyes that knew how to listen. I once believed I was a good judge of people. It turns out some wolves wear sheep's clothing beautifully. A nurse came to tell me the surgery had been scheduled but required additional confirmation. I signed again without hesitation. Money can be earned back. A child cannot. In that moment, I promised myself that no matter what happened, I would not let Lily wake up in a world where the betrayer was still standing there, pretending to be her husband. My phone vibrated. Naomi. "Location confirmed," she said. "Marcus is at Marina del Rey. The yacht is docked at Pier 3. I closed my eyes for 1 second and took a deep breath. "And the finances?" I asked. "Reviewing," Naomi replied. "There are some personal loans, a home mortgage, a vehicle lease. Not exactly clean." I smiled for the first time since arriving in Los Angeles. It wasn't a happy smile. It was recognition. I didn't confront Marcus that night. I sat outside the operating room, back straight, hands clasped, the same way I'd sat in closed boardrooms waiting for board votes. The difference was that this time, what was being decided wasn't stock ownership, but my daughter's heartbeat. When the operating room doors closed, I knew the wheels were in motion, quietly, slowly, but nothing would stop them. Naomi sent another message. "Ethan, if we do this, there's no turning back." I replied instantly without thinking. "Activate everything." I stood up from the cold plastic chair outside the operating room and stepped into the hallway, where the fluorescent lights stretched endlessly. Naomi kept her word. Barely 10 minutes after her last message, I received a set of photos and a clipped live stream, sent straight to my phone. I didn't need the sound to know where it was. I recognized the yacht immediately. White hull, gleaming teak deck, LED lights running along the sides, reflecting off the black water of Marina del Rey. On the bow, polished metal letters curved under the lights. Lily. My daughter's name. I had put that name on the boat on their wedding day, when Lily was still smiling, believing she had found the man who would hold her hand for life. Now that name pulsed in time with electronic music. Marcus stood at the center of the deck, one hand holding a champagne glass, the other resting casually on the waist of a blonde woman. Vanessa. Naomi added a brief caption. Preliminary file, Vanessa Cole. Claims to be a private healthcare specialist. I zoomed in. The way she tilted her head when she smiled, the way Marcus leaned in to whisper something. This wasn't a new affair. It was the intimacy of people who had been close long enough to stop pretending. I checked the time. 11:42 p.m. At the same moment, behind me in the hallway, a nurse hurried toward the operating room with a hospital phone in her hand. I knew who that call was for. and I knew it wouldn't be answered. My phone rang, an incoming call from the ICU internal number. I answered without speaking. "Mr. Caldwell," the familiar female voice said, trying to stay calm. "We still haven't been able to reach the patient's husband. Could you—" "I know," I said gently, surprising even myself. "Proceed according to protocol. I'll assume all financial responsibility." On the other end, I heard a soft exhale, like someone had just set down a heavy load. I ended the call and looked back at my phone screen. In the next live stream clip, Marcus raised his glass and laughed. I turned the sound on just in time. "To freedom," he said, his voice thick with alcohol. The crowd around him cheered, laughter mixing with the sound of waves hitting the hull. At that exact moment, another notification appeared on my screen. "Missed call, ICU." I didn't need more proof. If anyone asked me what I felt in that second, I would say nothing. That wouldn't be true. The feeling had simply shifted, colder, sharper, like when I prepared to sign an order dissolving a company. I called Naomi. "Start," I said. "Buy up every personal debt Marcus has, all of it." Naomi was silent for exactly 2 seconds, the silence of someone mentally reviewing legal procedures. "It will take some time," she said, "but it's doable." "I'm not in a hurry," I replied. "I need it done right." Meanwhile, the security team Naomi hired sent a preliminary report. They stayed far enough away to avoid attention, but close enough to observe the deck. Strange faces, quick handshakes, small packages passed and disappearing into jacket pockets. I wasn't law enforcement, but I'd lived long enough to recognize familiar signs. Naomi didn't spell it out. She sent one line. "Signs of illegal substance use. No intervention per your instruction." I typed back, "Preserve the scene. No one touches anything." That was the hardest part. Doing nothing. My entire life I'd acted early, cut losses at the first sign of risk. But this time, I needed Marcus confident, needed him to believe the night belonged to him. That confidence would make him careless. And carelessness, for people like Marcus, always comes at a price. I put my phone away and returned to the chair outside the operating room. When a doctor passed by, I stood and asked questions in the calmest voice I could manage. He answered briefly, professionally, offering no promises beyond doing their best. I nodded, thanked him, and sat back down. To everyone else, I was just an anxious, helpless old man waiting for news. I let them believe that. Feigned helplessness had served me well before. Time dragged. Each vibration of my phone made my heart skip. Most messages were from Naomi, updates on negotiations, a mortgage nearly finalized, a vehicle lease in the process of creditor transfer. I read them without replying. I didn't want to lose focus on the beeping machines behind that door. Just before 3 a.m., a nurse stepped out, searching for me with her eyes. I stood immediately. "We have initial blood test results," she said quietly. "Not final conclusions, but there are some abnormal indicators." I asked which ones. She hesitated, then listed medical terms I didn't need to fully understand. One sentence was enough. Insulin levels are abnormally high compared to her medical history. It felt like someone tightened a bolt inside my chest. Insulin. Lily was not diabetic. I knew that better than anyone. I thanked the nurse, told her to continue her work, and sat back down. My hands rested on my knees, clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. The pieces were fitting together into a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't look away from. My phone vibrated again. "Naomi." "Ethan, I need final confirmation. Once the debt purchases are complete, we can act immediately." I looked at the operating room doors where my daughter was fighting for every breath. I typed back, "Proceed." Somewhere out there, Marcus was still raising his glass on a boat named Lily, believing he was celebrating freedom. And I was sitting here, under the hospital's cold lights, waiting for full lab results, knowing that once they arrived, none of us would be able to pretend anymore. The nurse returned less than 10 minutes later. This time she didn't stand in the hallway. She leaned in close and spoke so softly it was as if the walls themselves might be listening. The fluorescent lights reflected off her face, making her eyes look darker, more exhausted. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm only authorized to say this," she hesitated. "The patient's insulin levels are abnormally high. There is no history of diabetes in her records. We're repeating the tests to rule out error." I didn't ask her to repeat it. Some things only need to be heard once. Lily was not diabetic. I knew that more clearly than any doctor in the building. I was the one who took her for annual checkups, the one who kept every medical file locked in the family safe. Insulin does not appear in a healthy person's blood on its own. It has to be administered. I thanked the nurse with a slow nod. When she left, I sat alone, staring at my hands. They still trembled slightly, but it was no longer fear. It was my body restraining a fury my mind refused to unleash. Another doctor came out, tall, thin, glasses slipping down his nose. He spoke about vitals, anesthesia, risks during and after surgery. I listened, nodded, asked the right questions at the right moments. On the outside, I was a worried but cooperative father. Inside, every word was just background noise to a thought growing heavier by the second. As he turned to go back in, I asked casually, "The bruises on her wrist, are those from the IV?" He paused for half a second. Half a second was all I needed to know I'd touched something sensitive. "Partially," he said, adjusting his tone, "but some marks don't fully align with standard medical procedures. We'll document it." "Don't align." I closed my eyes for a moment. I pictured Lily as a child, her slender wrist resting in my hand as I taught her to swim at the public pool. That wrist now bore marks of being restrained. Someone had held it. Someone close enough, confident enough, familiar enough that Lily couldn't fight back. My phone rang, breaking the thought. "Marcus." I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Dad," he said, his voice lowered, trying to sound serious. The music behind him was quieter now, but I could still hear waves and wind. "I just heard Lily was taken into surgery. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "The doctors are doing everything they can," I said. "They needed your signature from the start. Where are you?" He sighed, acting well. "I'm on my way to pray. I didn't expect things to escalate so fast." I didn't expose the lie. I let him continue. Sometimes the best way to reveal the truth is to let a liar keep talking. He paused, then asked the question that froze my blood. "Dad, if the worst happens," he said slowly, "I mean, if there's an accidental death, would an autopsy be required?" I didn't answer immediately. The ICU hallway was eerily quiet. The hum of air conditioning above, distant footsteps of nurses. "Why would you ask that?" I finally said. He hesitated, then replied, "I just want to be prepared. People say the legal side can get complicated." I heard a glass being set down on wood on the other end of the line. He wasn't in a chapel. He was sitting comfortably somewhere. I ended the call without another word. My grip tightened around the phone until I could feel the hard plastic pressing into my palm. That wasn't a worried husband's question. It was a calculated one. I called Naomi immediately. She answered on the first ring. "He just asked about an autopsy," I said. I didn't need to explain more. Naomi was silent for a few seconds, then exhaled. "Ethan," she said, "if we suspect poisoning, I can request an emergency legal order, evidence preservation, restricted access." "Too late," I replied. "He's out there, and Lily's on the operating table." Naomi understood. "Then you want to switch strategies?" I looked at the operating room door, the red light above it still on. "Force him to show up," I said. in the language he understands best. Money. I authorized the surgery under my personal financial guarantee. No need to involve Marcus anymore. I signed everything they put in front of me. Endless numbers blurred past my eyes, meaningless now. I would sell my entire life if I had to, as long as Lily had a chance. Once everything was set in motion, I stepped aside to a quieter corner. Naomi sent another update. Marcus's debts weren't as large as I'd expected, but they were scattered enough to form a net. A mortgage on the beach house, a lease on a luxury SUV, several high-limit credit cards. The tools he used to maintain the image of a successful man. "We can acquire them overnight," Naomi wrote, "but it will take time." "Do it," I replied. Another message appeared, this one from the security team. "The yacht has shut off the live stream. Engines just started." I looked at the tracking map Naomi attached. The glowing dot representing the boat was moving slowly away from the pier, toward the bay. He was leaving. I leaned against the wall, feeling the cold seep through my thin jacket. In my mind, the final pieces clicked into place. Insulin in her blood, bruises on her wrist, the autopsy question. The yacht named Lily leaving the dock on the very night she was wheeled into surgery. This was no longer instinct. It was a pattern. And I had seen enough patterns in my life to know they are never accidental. My phone vibrated again. Naomi. "Ethan, the vessel is about to leave stable signal range. If he goes any farther, intervention will be more complicated." I looked back at the operating room door. The red light was still on. I replied slowly, "Let him go. When he turns back, there will be nothing left for him to cling to." Somewhere out there, Marcus Hale was steering the boat bearing my daughter's name out to sea, believing he was leaving behind a problem that would soon resolve itself. And I stood in the hospital, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant and the hum of machines, knowing that the blood in Lily's body was telling a very different story. And when that story was fully told, no yacht would ever be fast enough to escape it. Naomi worked the way I had known for 2 decades. No noise, no excess emotion, only speed and precision. By the time I returned to the chair outside the operating room, less than 30 minutes after her last message, my phone began vibrating non-stop, like a circuit that had just been switched on. The mortgage on Marcus's beach house, acquired. The lease on the SUV, creditor rights transferred. 3 high-limit credit cards, ownership changed. The updates appeared clean and dry, like an end-of-quarter financial report. But I knew behind them was a legal machine spinning up, and once it reached full speed, it would drag everything standing on the tracks along with it. Naomi called me. "Ethan," she said, "they all have one thing in common." "Insecurity clause," I replied without thinking. The insecurity clause, a small, often overlooked paragraph in contracts that allows creditors to demand immediate recovery when they believe the collateral is at risk due to reckless, illegal, or unstable behavior by the borrower. I had seen that clause choke companies once thought untouchable. I never imagined I would use it against my daughter's husband. "Exactly," Naomi said. "Given the current situation, signs of illegal substance use, legal exposure, and leaving the dock at night, we have grounds." I looked at the red light above the operating room door, still glowing. "Proceed," I said. No hesitation. I didn't need to imagine the moment Marcus realized what was happening. I had sat across from enough CEOs when they saw their accounts frozen. That look, caught between shock and denial, never changes. Still, I wanted to know exactly how it unfolded. About 15 minutes later, Naomi sent me a screenshot. A cascade of notifications from Marcus's banking app overlapped like hailstones. Transaction declined. Card temporarily blocked. Please contact your creditor. I pictured Marcus at the yacht's bar, handing over his card. His smile not yet faded before it was returned with a polite shake of the head. I felt no pleasure, only inevitability. Naomi added, "Locked across the board." I replied with a single period. Between us, that was enough. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the hospital parking lot. Cars sat quietly under dull yellow sodium lights, unaware that somewhere else, a luxury SUV had just become an asset subject to immediate repossession. I called Naomi again. "Prepare the recovery team," I said. "No need to show up yet. Wait for the signal." Naomi understood. She never asked what the signal was. That was the difference between a good attorney and an exceptional one. I picked up my phone and opened the conversation with Marcus. I typed slowly, one word at a time, as if writing a message of comfort to my son-in-law. "Don't come to the hospital. Pray for Lily." I sent it, then locked the screen. I didn't want to see his response right away. I wanted him to read it in his world, amid the music, the lights, and the half-empty glasses. The security team sent their next report. The yacht had left the pier, bow pointed toward the bay. The live stream was off, but they continued filming from a distance. I told them to keep everything as is. "Don't let them suspect anything," I said. "Let them celebrate." I wanted Marcus to drink down the last drop of that night, to believe freedom was still in his grasp, even as the rope tightened around his neck. I went back to the chair, my back against the wall, eyes fixed on the white ceiling. HUD. Doctors' footsteps echoed. Carts rolled softly past. In another world, out there offshore, Marcus was probably trying to laugh louder to mask the irritation of his card being declined. He might have blamed the system, poor signal, some incompetent bank. He didn't yet know the problem wasn't the machines. My phone vibrated. A message from Marcus, short and sharp. My account's glitching. "Dad, do you know what's going on?" I stared at the words for a long moment. I could have answered in 100 ways. I chose silence. Silence, for people used to instant compliance, drives them mad the fastest. Naomi sent another file. "The yacht repossession order is ready," she wrote. "All it needs is your signature." I opened the document, skimmed the familiar legal language. The boat's name appeared on the first page, along with its registration number and the violated clauses. I paused for a second at the name. Lily. I thought of my daughter lying behind that door, her chest rising and falling with the ventilator. I signed. When I clicked confirm, a strange calm washed over me. Not relief. The feeling of someone who had finally closed a trap laid long ago. I sent Naomi a short message. "Activate when I say." She replied almost immediately. "Understood." The security team reported that the party on the yacht was still going. They captured more images. Marcus leaning against the railing, phone in hand, a flicker of irritation crossing his face before Vanessa stepped close, placed a hand on his chest, whispered something that made him smile again. I didn't study the photos for long. I didn't want to remember his face too clearly. I only needed to know he was exactly where I wanted him. I stood when a doctor stepped out of the operating room, pulling off his mask. "The surgery is still in progress," he said. "We'll update you when there's progress." I nodded and thanked him. I didn't ask more. Some questions only add anxiety without answers. I returned to the window. The Los Angeles night sky was clear, stars faint behind the city lights. Out there, the boat named Lily was cutting through the water, unaware that its paperwork had just changed hands. I thought about the moment the recovery team would step onto the deck, about Marcus's face when he heard the simple sentence, "This asset has been repossessed." I wasn't in a hurry. Everything was in place. My phone vibrated again. "Naomi." "Ready." I looked back at the operating room door. The red light was still on. I replied, "Wait." I wanted to wait a little longer. I wanted Marcus to believe the night still belonged to him. Because when that red light went out, and when I gave the final word to activate the repossession, there would be no yacht, no credit cards, nowhere left for him to hide. And I knew that moment was very close. The music on the yacht didn't stop because someone pressed a button. It stopped because there are moments when even the most powerful speakers dare not make another sound. Naomi messaged me just as I was leaning against the cold wall at the far end of the ICU hallway. "Recovery team is on board." 6 words, no emotion, no excess. I could picture it clearly without details. 4 men in dark suits, low-heeled dress shoes, stepping onto the deck as if it were their office. No running, no shouting, no weapons, just paperwork. On the yacht named Lily, the instant the music died, the sound of waves hitting the hull became unbearably loud. The LED lights were still on, glasses still full, but the atmosphere had changed. I wasn't there, but I had seen that scene hundreds of times in my life, when a party is cut short by reality and no one is ready for it. The recovery team announced the default in calm voices. No long explanations. The new creditor's name was read, the clause cited, and the closing line was always the same. "This asset is being repossessed effective immediately." Guests standing closest first thought it was a staged joke. They laughed nervously, looked around for cameras. But when they saw the men's expressions didn't waver, the laughter faded. Naomi sent me a short video clip, filmed from a distance. I didn't turn on the sound, but I could see the confusion spreading like a crack in glass. People turned to one another, asked questions, then turned back toward Marcus. He stood at the center of the deck as if it were still his stage, struggling to hold on to a smile that had begun to stiffen. A server approached and said something to him. Marcus pulled a card from his wallet, the centurion he was so proud of, the one he placed on tables like a declaration of status. The server shook his head. Marcus frowned and tried again. This time, I saw the red glow of the card reader reflect on his face. Transaction declined. That was the first moment I saw Marcus lose his footing, not physically, but in role. He turned to the people around him, raised his voice, as if volume could fix a system error. No one answered. The crowd began to thin, like water draining from a sinking ship. Then he did exactly what I knew he would do. He used Lily as a shield. Naomi sent the next clip, this time with sound. Marcus's voice was sharp and rushed. "You can't do this. My wife is dying in the hospital. I need this boat. I need—" He stopped, searching for words. "I need your compassion." I closed my eyes for a moment. Lily was dying, yes, but not because of fate, because of him. And now he was using that truth as leverage, like a final card in his hand. No one on the recovery team wavered. One of them replied calmly, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "We're very sorry, but that does not change the legal status of the asset." That cold courtesy, I knew, cut deeper than any insult. While Marcus was still arguing, Vanessa had already begun backing away. I recognized her even from the angled shot. The way a woman exits a crowd when she senses danger, unhurried, not panicked, eyes always searching for an escape. In her hand was a small clutch, but the diamond necklace on her neck was impossible to hide. I recognized it instantly. Lily's heirloom, the jewelry I had given my daughter on her 30th birthday. I called Naomi. "The necklace," I said. "Recover it." Naomi didn't ask questions. She relayed the order. Vanessa had made it halfway across the deck before she was stopped. I saw her turn, say something quick and low, probably a familiar excuse. But when one of the recovery team pointed directly at the necklace and stated it was property of the Caldwell family, her expression changed completely. Calculation vanished, replaced by irritation. She spun back toward Marcus. "You said everything was handled," she snapped, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "You said money wasn't an issue." Marcus turned on her, face flushed. "Shut up," he said. "Not now." But Vanessa didn't stop. She laughed, a short, sharp laugh. "When is it ever the right time?" she asked. "When you don't have a single cent left?" She unclasped the necklace, but she didn't hand it to Marcus. She handed it directly to the recovery team, as if wanting it over as quickly as possible. "Take it," she said. "I don't want any part of this." It was public betrayal, without vows or tears, just a decisive motion, like discarding something that no longer had value. Marcus stood frozen, staring at her as if seeing who she truly was for the first time. He didn't have time to process that pain. Naomi sent another message, brief. "Vehicle has been towed." I could picture it easily. Marcus's luxury SUV parked near the marina, nose pointed toward the road as if ready to leave at any moment. The more ready it looked, the more brutal it was to see it lifted off the ground. The clank of metal chains, the wheels spinning uselessly in the air, the yellow lights of the tow truck illuminating Marcus's face as he ran after it, shouting, all of it unfolding in front of him, in front of the guests who hadn't yet left. I felt no satisfaction, only a chain of cause and effect playing out to its end. Vanessa disappeared from the frame. I assumed she'd found a way down to the dock, blended into the crowd, carrying only what still belonged to her. Marcus remained, standing on the increasingly empty deck, under lights still burning, but with no one left to illuminate. My phone rang. Marcus's number. I didn't answer. I let it ring until it stopped. I knew he would call again. And he did. A second time, then a third. I still didn't answer. Some conversations, if they happen too early, only delay the inevitable. A nurse stepped out of the operating room and approached me. "We've stabilized the situation," she said, "but the patient is not out of danger yet." I nodded and thanked her. I didn't ask more. I turned away from the hallway and rested my forehead against the wall for one brief moment. Then I straightened up. I didn't allow myself to collapse while everything was still unfinished. Naomi messaged again. "Marcus just left the yacht. He's asking for directions to the hospital." I looked at the operating room door. The red light was still on, but it seemed slightly less harsh. I knew the moment was coming, the moment Marcus realized there was nowhere left to cling to except Lily's name, except this hospital. I didn't stop him. I didn't send another message. I let him decide to run here on his own 2 feet, carrying everything that had just collapsed behind him, because I knew that when he walked into this hospital, when he saw me standing there, everything would move into its next phase. And I also knew that tonight, Marcus Hale would have no choice left but to face it. Marcus left the marina in a state he couldn't have imagined just hours earlier. No cash. Cards locked, his phone flashing. No service before shutting off entirely, as if the network itself had turned its back on him. Naomi sent me location updates in short intervals, the glowing dot on the map trembling, then stopping, trembling, then stopping. A man who had always been carried by money, now relearning how to move on his own feet. He stood by the roadside under sodium lights spilling onto his wrinkled shirt, rumpled by sea wind. I imagined him raising his hand to flag down a taxi, a strained smile trying to return out of habit. The first car passed by, the driver glancing and shaking his head. The second slowed, the window lowering halfway. I received a short audio clip from the surveillance team. They kept enough distance not to be noticed, but close enough to catch fragments of dialogue. "Please," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "My wife is dying. I need to get to the hospital now." The driver looked him up and down, eyes lingering on the leather shoes that were once polished, now dusty. "Money?" the driver asked. Marcus froze for half a second, then dug into his pockets, pulling out useless items, a confiscated key, a dead piece of plastic. "I'll pay later," he said. "I swear." The window rolled up. The car sped off, leaving gasoline fumes and heavy silence. That was the moment I understood. When someone uses another person's pain as a pass, eventually, when they need it themselves, no one believes them. I felt no glee, only a law operating exactly as it always does. I told the surveillance team to keep their distance. "Don't help," I texted. "Let him tire himself out." Not because I wanted to torture Marcus, but because exhaustion strips a person bare faster than any confrontation. He walked a long stretch, stopped to catch his breath, made futile calls. City lights smeared cold yellow streaks across his face, exposing panic no longer concealed. At the hospital, I had already prepared a different atmosphere. No noise, no confrontation, just silence. I instructed the front desk and the on-duty nurses, "If the husband arrives, follow protocol. No need to notify me immediately." I wanted Marcus to walk into that space without welcome, to fully feel what it meant to be pushed to the margins, the feeling Lily had endured lying here alone. When I returned to the chair outside the ICU, the red light above the operating room door had gone dark. A doctor stepped out, removed his mask, eyes tired but bright. "The surgery was successful," he said. "We've stabilized her condition, but she's still in a coma and needs close monitoring." I nodded, my hands instinctively tightening and then releasing. Not full relief, just a rung placed between me and the abyss. I stood and walked into the inner waiting room. Lily lay there, quiet, the ventilator set to a steadier rhythm. I looked at her for a long time without touching her. I had learned that in some moments, presence matters more than words or gestures. I whispered softly, just loud enough for myself to hear. "I'm here." Naomi messaged, "Digital evidence is ready. Video, location data, transaction logs. I'm calling the police." I replied, "Bring them, but don't rush." Some things need the right timing, not just the right law. Marcus appeared at the ICU entrance near dawn. I didn't look at him right away. I let him stand there, breathing hard, shirt wrinkled, hair messy from wind and sweat. He looked around, searching for a familiar face, an arm to support him. There was none. I felt his gaze press against my back like a silent plea. "Dad," he said, his voice smaller than I had ever heard. I didn't turn. I stood there, looking through the glass into the patient room. The silence stretched, making him restless. "Dad," he repeated, this time with a hint of the old irritation. I turned slowly. "You're late," I said. 4 words, no accusation, no explanation. He swallowed hard. I ran into some problems," he began. "Money, the car." I raised my hand, signaling him to stop. "Lily is in a coma," I said. "The doctors say she needs quiet." He nodded repeatedly, as if nodding could erase what had already happened. "I just want to see her," he said. "I'm her husband." "Not right now," I replied. I looked straight into his eyes. That look, I recognized it, wavering between fear and calculation. "Sit down," I said. He sat. The plastic chair creaked softly under his weight. A very small sound, but in that space, it rang like a verdict. Meanwhile, Naomi and 2 plainclothes officers entered from the far end of the hallway. They didn't approach immediately. They stood at just enough distance to observe, just enough not to cause a disturbance. I felt the air shift, like a cold draft moving through a sealed room. I opened my phone and checked one last time what I had prepared. Video files with timestamps, the yacht's location data, logs of the frozen card transactions, copies of contracts with the insecurity clause highlighted. I wasn't planning a performance. I just needed everything ready. Marcus noticed the officers. He jumped to his feet. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice pitching high. "I didn't do anything." I placed a hand on his shoulder, light but firm. "Sit," I said. This time he sat without resistance. Exhaustion finished the rest. Naomi stepped closer and nodded at me. "We just need to verify a few things," she said to Marcus, professional and even. He turned to me, eyes wide. Dad?" I didn't answer. I looked through the glass again, where Lily lay still, the ventilator breathing steadily for her. I reminded myself everything I did from this point on was not for revenge. It was for protection. One of the officers took out a small device and placed it on the table. "We need to confirm some data," he said. "We'll need your cooperation." Marcus stared at the device like it was some strange animal. "What is that?" he asked. "A camera," Naomi said calmly. "It's been activated." I didn't look at Marcus when I said the last sentence of that night. I looked at my own reflection in the glass of the patient room. "The path you're on," I said slowly, "has no exit." Marcus didn't wait for permission. He shoved the ICU door so hard the glass rattled with a dull crack, drawing every eye in the hallway. A nurse gasped on reflex, but he slipped past her and charged straight into the white space where Lily lay. He moved so fast he nearly tripped over the IV line, calling his wife's name over and over in a hoarse voice, as if every syllable had been rehearsed. "Lily, can you hear me?" He dropped to his knees beside the bed, trembling hands reaching out, his face twisted with a mix of panic and performance. Anyone who didn't know the truth might have believed him. I didn't. "I said no," I said, my voice not loud but sharp enough to cut through everything. "Don't touch her." Marcus spun around, eyes bloodshot. "Dad, I just want—" "Out," I said, not letting him finish. I stepped between him and Lily, my back straight, my feet planted on the cold floor. "The doctors said she needs quiet. You don't have the right to break that." He stood up, his hand still hanging in the air, as if he wasn't used to being refused. "I'm her husband," he said, his voice shaking. "I have the right." "Rights aren't what you have right now," I replied. I didn't look at him. I looked at Lily. Her steady breathing was the only thing I allowed myself to focus on. Marcus turned to the nurse, then to the others in the room searching for support. No one answered. The silence spread, thick and heavy, until he began to lose patience. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "My accounts were hacked. The car was towed by mistake. The yacht, it was a mistake too. Someone's setting me up." I turned back to him for the first time since he'd entered. "Hacked," I repeated, my voice so calm it sounded foreign even to me. "All of it?" He nodded urgently. "Yes, someone's trying to hurt me, trying to destroy our family." He ran a hand through his hair hard, a gesture of desperation. "I swear to you, Dad, I don't know what's happening." I let him finish. I waited until he had no words left to add. Then I said, "Marcus, I bought all of your debt." He froze. "All of it," I emphasized. "The house, the car, the credit cards, the yacht, everything you thought you owned, it belongs to me now." I met his eyes. "Financially, you've been liquidated." The color drained from Marcus's face so fast I could see it happen, every feature blanching. "Dad, you can't do this," he stammered. "I'm family." "Family," I repeated, "is the only reason I did." He stumbled back one step, then another, until his back hit the medical supply cabinet. His eyes darted, searching for an escape, a crack in the story he could squeeze through. "You've been tricked," he said, his voice rising. "Someone staged this, the yacht, the party." I took out my phone, not rushed, not hesitant. I opened the prepared folder, selected a photo, and set the phone down on the table beside the hospital bed. "You recognize this, don't you?" I asked. In the image, Marcus stood on the deck, glass raised, Vanessa pressed close to him, LED lights behind them forming an almost glamorous halo. The timestamp was clear in the corner, matching exactly the moment the ICU had called him the second time. He glanced down, then snapped his head up. "Fake," he said. "Technology these days." I swiped to another, then another. Short video clips, unedited, capturing his voice, raising a toast to freedom. I didn't turn on the sound. I didn't need to. Reading his lips was enough. Marcus covered his face, then dropped his hands, his eyes flashing toward me with desperate anger. "What are you doing?" he screamed. "Do you want me dead?" I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside, making room for Naomi and the two officers to enter the room. They didn't speak right away. Their presence alone was a statement. Marcus whipped around toward them. "You have no right." "Please sit down," one officer said calmly. "We just need your cooperation." He didn't sit. He scanned the room, then suddenly turned toward the door as if to bolt. I didn't stop him. The officers stepped forward in unison, just enough to block the exit. Marcus halted, breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead. Naomi opened her laptop and placed it on the table. "Marcus," she said, her tone level, "we've reviewed the transactions, location data, and statements related to Lily's condition." She paused. "We have something else we want you to see." Marcus turned to me, panic flooding his eyes. "Dad, please believe me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I didn't do anything. I love Lily." I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, "If you love Lily, sit down." He sat. Naomi pressed a key. The screen showed a frozen frame before the video began. It was Lily's bedroom. I recognized it instantly, the bedside lamp, the slightly crooked painting I had promised to fix for her. The timestamp in the corner read 2 days before Lily was hospitalized. Marcus went rigid the moment he saw it. "What is this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Naomi didn't answer. The video started. I didn't look at the screen. I watched Marcus. I watched his eyes widen, then contract, then flood with panic so naked it could no longer be hidden. I heard his breathing quicken, heard a "no" tear out of his throat like a reflex. "Stop it," he screamed. "Turn it off." Naomi didn't stop it. In the ICU room, just minutes earlier, the stage for his performance as a grieving husband, the truth began to take shape. No narration, no explanation, just images captured when Marcus thought no one was watching. I stood there, hands in my coat pockets, feeling my heart beat slow but heavy. I knew this moment would come. I just hadn't expected it to arrive in a room this quiet. As the video continued, Marcus doubled over, clutching his head. His sobbing broke out, arrhythmic, uncontrolled. I felt no pity. I saw only a performance that had reached its end. Naomi glanced at me, very slightly. I nodded. The video kept playing, and I knew what was about to appear on that screen would leave no way back. The screen continued. In the grainy black and white footage, Lily's bedroom appeared under the dim glow of a night lamp. Lily lay on her side, hair spread across the pillow, her breathing slow and even. I recognized the thin blanket she'd used since college, the one she never gave up, no matter how many new sets I bought. The door opened quietly. Marcus stepped inside. He wasn't wearing sleepwear. He was wearing gloves. I heard a faint hiss in the ICU room, no idea whose throat it came from. It might have been mine. In the video, Marcus stood beside the bed for a moment, looking at Lily the way one inspects an item one last time before packing it away. Then he pulled something small from his pocket. A syringe. He removed the cap, pressed the plunger slightly, a bead of liquid catching the light. Every movement was smooth, practiced, steady. There was no sign of panic or grief. When the needle touched Lily's skin, my chest tightened as if someone had squeezed it shut. I didn't move. I didn't allow myself to look away. I had promised myself I would watch to the end, so I would never forget. Marcus depressed the plunger. He held the needle in Lily's skin for an extra beat, as if to be sure. Then he withdrew it, placed a cotton pad, pulled the blanket neatly back into place. He looked down at her once more. And he smiled. Not a strained smile, not a trembling one. It was a relieved smile, like someone who had just finished an unpleasant but necessary task. That smile made the ICU room feel visibly colder. I heard someone behind me suck in a sharp breath. "Stop it!" Marcus screamed again, his voice shattered. "Turn it off! That's not—" Naomi let the video run a few more seconds, long enough for that smile to burn itself into everyone's eyes. Then she paused it. "You recognize this angle, don't you?" she asked, her voice calmly merciless. Marcus didn't answer. He stared at the screen as if hypnotized. "I don't think you do," Naomi continued, "because you checked the ceiling, the outlets, behind the television. You were very careful." She tilted the screen slightly, pointing to the lower right corner. "But you didn't check the teddy bear." I took one step forward, just one. "Lily called me 2 weeks ago," I said, not looking at Marcus. "She told me something felt wrong. She said you kept coming into the room late. She was scared." I turned to face him. "She bought a disguised camera, motion activated, uploads to the cloud, gave me access." Marcus shook his head violently. "No," he whispered. "That's not how it was. It was just a sedative. A doctor prescribed it." "There was no prescription," Naomi cut in. "And this isn't a sedative." She opened another file and pulled up a lab report. "Exogenous insulin, high dose. Lily is not diabetic." Marcus looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Vanessa," he blurted, clinging to it like a lifeline. "She told me, she said—" "Vanessa has been named," Naomi said coldly, "in messages, in calls, and in the preparation of the medication." She closed the laptop softly. "You have no one left to blame." He laughed, a dry, hollow sound with no humor in it. "You're all trying to turn me into a monster," he said, his voice climbing. "Lily slipped. It was an accident. You injected her while she was asleep," I said, "and you smiled." The words landed like a blade. Marcus collapsed into the chair, his shoulders shaking. Then he sprang up so suddenly, one officer moved forward on instinct. "I love her!" he screamed. "I didn't want her to die!" "Step back," the officer ordered. Marcus didn't listen, his eyes locked on the hospital bed. Lily lay there, pale but peaceful, unaware of the storm raging in the room. Something flashed in Marcus's eyes, not love. It was the panic of a man about to lose everything. He lunged. Everything happened fast. I only saw him shove forward, shoulder knocking into an officer, his arm reaching for Lily. In that instant, I didn't think. I didn't weigh anything. I didn't remember how old I was or how worn my joints had become. I stepped in. My punch wasn't clean. It wasn't technical. It was the punch of a father who had held too much in for too long. My fist connected with Marcus's jaw with a dry, unmistakable crack, echoing through the room full of machines. He staggered, eyes wide, then went down hard, crashing into a supply cart. Metal clanged loudly. I stood in front of the bed, breathing hard, my hand numb. Pain shot from my knuckles up my arm, and I welcomed it. It reminded me I was still here, that Lily was still here. "Out of the room," I said, my voice low and final. "Now." The officers didn't wait. They restrained Marcus, twisting his arms behind his back. He didn't resist anymore. He looked at me, his lips trembling. "You can't," he began, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't look at him. I looked at Lily. And then I saw it. A very small movement. Lily's fingertip twitched. Then her eyelids fluttered, like someone trying to wake from a very deep dream. The heart monitor ticked up one beat. "Lily?" I whispered, afraid to speak louder, afraid of breaking the fragile moment. Her eyes opened, slowly, very slowly. Tired, but aware, they found me. And in that moment, every other sound in the room seemed to vanish. All I saw was my daughter looking at me, truly looking. "Dad," Lily whispered, weak but clear. I dropped to my knees beside the bed and took her hand, the tears finally spilling without permission. Behind me, the sound of handcuffs echoed as Marcus was led out of the room. I didn't turn around. Lily had opened her eyes, and I knew everything had just crossed into another chapter. Lily did not close her eyes again after waking. She looked at me for a long time, as if checking whether I was real. Her thin hand tightened around mine, weak but deliberate. I leaned closer so she wouldn't have to strain. "I heard," Lily whispered. Each word seemed to travel a long distance before leaving her throat. "I heard everything." I swallowed hard. I didn't ask what she heard. I knew. I knew she had heard Marcus's words, the panic, the denials, and the moment he lunged forward. I hated that thought, that my daughter had witnessed all of it while lying there helpless. But I didn't interrupt her. I let her speak. "I heard him talking about money," Lily continued, her eyes closing briefly, then opening again, as if reorganizing her memories. "About an accident. About just getting it done." She took a very shallow breath. I knew something wasn't right. I nodded, saying nothing. I didn't want to place any weight on her chest right now. A pause settled in, filled only by the steady beeping of the monitors. Lily turned her head toward the door where Marcus had just been taken away. There was no hatred in her eyes, only a painful clarity. "Dad," Lily said, her voice trembling more than before. I have something to tell you." I felt it before she said it. A cold intuition ran down my spine. I tightened my grip on her hand. "I'm here," I said. "Go ahead." Lily closed her eyes, tears spilling from the corners and running down her temples. I was pregnant. The world tilted. I couldn't hear the machines anymore. I couldn't hear footsteps in the hallway. Only that sentence echoed in my head, repeating, striking every corner of my mind. Pregnant. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I had prepared myself for many things, for betrayal, for crimes, for financial loss. I had not prepared for this. "I was going to tell you this weekend," Lily said, her eyes still closed. "I wanted to wait until after your birthday." I raised my other hand to cover my mouth, trying to keep myself upright. "How long?" I asked, my voice rough. 12 weeks, Lily answered. "The doctor said I had gestational diabetes. I needed close monitoring. I did everything exactly the way they told me to." I felt an invisible needle pierce straight through my chest. I understood. I understood before she continued. "Insulin," Lily whispered. "That dose, it didn't just make me pass out, it—" She stopped, unable to continue. The tears came harder. "It caused a miscarriage." I bent down until my forehead rested against her hand. I didn't know whether I was breathing or holding my breath. A child. A grandchild I had never known, and never would. I heard my heart pounding like a hammer. "The doctors said, placental abruption," Lily said, each word heavy. "They couldn't save it." A sound escaped me, not quite a sob, not quite a groan. I had witnessed many losses in my life, but never like this. Never a loss caused by the very person who was supposed to protect. On the other side of the room, Marcus was being held while the charges were read. I didn't turn around, but I heard the officer's flat, cold voice listing each count. Intentional, grievous bodily harm, poisoning, conspiracy. And when they mentioned the harm to the fetus, I heard a sharp breath, then a choked sob. Marcus collapsed, no more shouting, no more denials. Just a low, broken moan, like someone who had been drained of everything. I heard him whisper, "No," over and over, like a useless prayer. I didn't turn around. Not because I was afraid to look at him, but because I didn't want my daughter's eyes to land on him one more time. The officers finished reading the charges. They cuffed Marcus. The metal closed with a final, decisive click. He was pulled to his feet. Before being led out, he tried to turn back. I felt his gaze, pleading, panicked, empty. I still didn't look. "Take him away," I said, my voice so calm it sounded strange even to me. "Out of here." They did. The door closed, sealing the room off from whatever poison remained. Silence returned, heavy but necessary. I turned back to Lily. She was breathing shallowly, but her eyes were less frantic now. I wiped her tears gently. "I'm here," I said again, like an oath. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily nodded, a very small nod. "I know," she said. I need you to stay." "Of course," I replied. "I'll stay." Time moves differently in an ICU. It isn't measured in hours, but in breaths and steady beeps. I sat there, my hand never leaving Lily's, letting her drift back to sleep as the medication took hold. I looked at her face, thinner, harder, as if she had walked through a storm no one should ever have to endure. Outside that room, the wheels of justice began to turn. I knew that. Naomi would handle the legal side. The police already had enough. But as I sat there by the hospital bed, I realized there was still a gap in the story. One piece that hadn't been put in place. Vanessa. Her name came back to me like a thorn. The messages, the advice, the medication. If Marcus was the hand, Vanessa was the whispering voice. I looked at Lily, sleeping, and promised myself I wouldn't let that piece disappear into the shadows. I bent down and kissed my daughter lightly on the forehead. "Sleep," I whispered. "I'll take care of the rest." Outside, footsteps echoed down the ICU hallway, fading away. Marcus had been taken out, but I knew this story wasn't finished. There was still one person who hadn't been cuffed, and I wouldn't stop until every truth was brought into the light. Vanessa didn't stay in Los Angeles to watch the final act. She left that very night, fast and clean, the way people driven by survival instinct usually do. I knew not from intuition, but because Naomi called me near dawn when the fluorescent ICU lights had already made my eyes sting. "She booked a one-way ticket," Naomi said, her voice tired but steady. "LAX, business class, destination, Dubai." I wasn't surprised. Vanessa had always seen the world like an airport, nothing but temporary layovers on the way to something better. I nodded, though Naomi couldn't see me. "Let the police handle it," I said. "Keep it quiet." She understood. I didn't need blood. I needed closure. Vanessa was stopped at security while the sun still hadn't fully risen. She had changed clothes, dark dress, oversized sunglasses, hair neatly pulled back, the perfect look of someone who didn't want to be recognized. But what she carried wasn't nearly as subtle. In her carry-on bag, wrapped in an expensive silk scarf, were pieces of jewelry I recognized immediately, even through Naomi's description over the phone. The necklace Lily had worn at our anniversary dinner, 2 family rings that had belonged to my mother, a vintage watch I had given Lily when she graduated. The evidence was too clear to deny. When security asked her to follow them into a private room, Vanessa cried, not from remorse, but from inconvenience. She slipped into the role of victim quickly and skillfully, trembling voice, slumped shoulders, pleading eyes. But when they opened the bag and laid the items out on the cold stainless steel table, every script collapsed. "You are being detained on suspicion of theft and involvement in an ongoing criminal investigation," an officer said evenly. Vanessa looked at the items, then at the clock on the wall, and she asked very seriously, very calmly, "So, do I still keep my airline miles?" That question was recorded in the report, Naomi told me later, leaving a long silence on the line before repeating it. I closed my eyes. There are moments in life when you understand a person's true nature with absolute clarity. That was one of them. The case closed faster than I expected. No dramatic escape, no backroom deals. The evidence was thick. Marcus's testimony was heavy. Messages, transactions, search histories, everything stacked together like bricks, forming a wall with no gaps. I didn't attend the interrogations. I didn't need to see Vanessa again. My role there was finished. In the days that followed, I did what I do best: clean up. I sold the house in Malibu. No negotiation, no holding out for a better price. I didn't want anything that had ever been a backdrop to Lily's pain to exist one more day. I sold the car Marcus had driven like a symbol. I didn't keep a single dollar for myself. Everything carried the stench of a dirty deal, and I refused to carry it with me. The yacht, the vessel named after Lily, was different. I couldn't sell it. I couldn't imagine another family hosting parties on that deck, laughing, taking pictures, unaware that other laughter had once echoed there while my daughter lay between life and death. I signed the donation papers. The vessel was stripped of what wasn't needed, then towed far offshore, where the ocean is deep and quiet. It was sunk as an artificial reef, a structure for other life to begin. When I received the final photo, just a calm surface of water after the yacht disappeared, I felt something close to closure. The money from everything I liquidated, every cent, was transferred to the NICU. I didn't hold a ceremony. I didn't want my name on a wall. I just signed checks and asked them to buy more ventilators, more monitoring equipment, more beds for babies who needed them. I couldn't save my grandchild, but I could help other children have a chance. Lily recovered slowly but steadily. She slept a lot, but each time she woke, there was less darkness in her eyes. We didn't talk much about what had been lost. We talked about the weather in Chicago, about the old apartment overlooking the river, about winter mornings so cold your breath turns to steam. One afternoon, as the California sun slanted through the hospital window, Lily took my hand. "I want to go home," she said. I nodded. So do I. Chicago doesn't have the ocean. It has wind. It has steel and stone and unforgiving winters. But it's where we belong, where no one knows Lily as someone's wife, but simply as Lily, my daughter. I stood at the hospital window, looking out at the parking lot, where cars came and went in steady rhythm. Everything had been handled. Every link had been locked. But I knew the final chapter hadn't been written. Not here. Not in Los Angeles. We would go back to Chicago, and there, in the familiar cold and gray skies, I would learn how to live on, not as a victor, but as someone who had done his duty. This story isn't over. It's just getting ready to turn the page. Los Angeles sent us off with a morning that was cruelly clear. The sky was too blue, as if the city had never witnessed anything dark at all. Lily sat by the car window in a wheelchair, a thin blanket draped across her knees. She was strong enough to leave the hospital, clear-minded enough to know she would never return here. I signed the final paperwork, shook the doctor's hands, nodded to the nurses. No one said much. There was no need. On the way to the airport, Lily looked outside in silence. I knew she was taking it in. Not the scenery, but the feeling. The feeling of a place that had taken too much. When the plane lifted off, Lily closed her eyes. I didn't wake her. I let the past stay beneath the clouds. Chicago welcomed us with wind. Not the gentle breeze of the coast, but the sharp, cold wind that cuts through a coat like a reminder that here, everything is real. Lily took a deep breath as she stepped out of the airport. She shivered slightly, not just from the cold. "I remember this smell," Lily said softly. "The smell of home." I nodded. I remembered it too. The first days back in the apartment overlooking the Chicago River moved slowly, thick like honey. Lily slept often. When she was awake, she read or simply sat watching the gray water roll below. There were no more naive questions, no more plans drawn in pink ink. In her eyes was something new, harder, deeper, not dark but wary. One afternoon, while I was making tea in the kitchen, Lily called me. "Dad," she said, "do you think I'll ever go back to who I was before?" I set the kettle down and sat across from her. "No," I answered. "And I don't think that's a bad thing." Lily looked at me, waiting. "You've learned something many people spend their whole lives learning," I said. "That kindness needs boundaries. That trust doesn't mean blindness." She nodded slowly. "I feel different," Lily said, "like I have a new layer of skin." "That's protection," I said. "You need it." News about Marcus didn't stay in the mainstream media for long. There was no noisy trial, no exclusive interviews, but I knew every detail. I always did. Marcus was placed in solitary confinement. Not as a privilege, but as a precaution. People like him aren't welcome in the general prison population. I received regular reports, dry, precise, 23 hours a day in a cell, 1 hour out under supervision, no phone calls, no correspondence beyond an approved list. Some people asked me if I felt satisfaction. I didn't answer, because that wasn't the right word. Satisfaction is for small wins. This wasn't a win. This was an ending. Naomi sent me copies of every appeal. I read them all, not out of worry, but out of responsibility. I followed every move, every desperate attempt by a man who believed money had saved him before, and would save him again. I didn't interfere directly. I only made sure the law was enforced exactly as it should be. One evening, Lily sat across from me at the dinner table, gently pushing her plate away. "Dad," she asked, "if you didn't have money, would things have turned out differently?" I looked at her for a long time. There was no simple answer to that question. "Money doesn't create who a person is," I said. "It only reveals it." Lily thought for a moment. "Then what is money?" "That depends on whose hands it's in," I replied. "In the hands of the wrong person, it's bait. In the hands of someone clear-minded, it's a tool." In the days that followed, I taught Lily things I should have taught her much earlier. Not how to make money, but how to stay safe, how to read contracts, how to ask questions, how not to let someone else's silence turn into a trap for her kindness. We talked about boundaries, about not needing to explain no more than once, about walking away when your instincts speak, even when your heart hesitates. "I don't want to become suspicious," Lily said once. "You don't have to," I answered. "You just have to become aware." Life didn't return to what it was. It moved forward, in a different direction. Lily started working again, part-time, remotely. She chose mornings with soft sunlight and quiet afternoons. I returned to the office, not to run things, but to observe. I'd built enough. Now it was time to preserve. One night, as snow began to fall lightly outside the window, Lily stood beside me, looking out at the city coated in a thin layer of white. "Dad," she said, "I think, if it weren't for your money, I wouldn't have survived." I shook my head. "No," I said. "You survived because you were alert in time, because you dared to doubt. Money only helped me buy time." Lily was quiet. Then she asked very softly, "So, what's the real value of money?" I didn't answer right away. I watched the snow fall, watched distant lights reflect on the dark river. That question didn't need an immediate answer. Maybe it was a question that would follow us into the final chapter. The sentence was handed down on a cold morning when the Chicago wind cut along the gray stone buildings like a thin blade. Marcus received a sentence his lawyers had once called unimaginable during their last desperate negotiations. No bail, no leniency, no chance of turning back outside concrete walls and iron bars. He would grow old there year by year with the memory of what he had done and what he had destroyed. Vanessa, the woman who once called herself a caregiver, was convicted as an accomplice. Her professional license was permanently revoked, her name erased from every credentialing system. She would never again stand beside a patient's bed, and in some ways, that was the starkest form of justice. I wasn't in the courtroom on sentencing day, not because I was afraid, not because I was avoiding it, but because at that moment I was sitting in my living room beside Lily. She was drinking ginger tea, both hands wrapped around a ceramic mug as if it were a new habit. Outside the window, snow fell thin and steady, covering the city in a necessary silence. For me, victory wasn't watching Marcus being led away. It was seeing my daughter alive, breathing, present in that room. Lily survived, but she was no longer the same woman. Her innocence died somewhere in that ICU room, along with illusions of unconditional love. What remained wasn't hatred. It was a kind of cold, steady clarity, quiet and firm. I watched Lily step out of the darkness little by little, not with eyes searching for revenge, but with the gaze of someone who understands how cruel the world can be, and therefore chooses to live more carefully. I sold everything that had ever been tied to Marcus: the house, the car, the accounts, the possessions that had symbolized a life built on lies. I didn't keep a single dollar. I didn't want to carry anything that smelled of him into the rest of my life. The yacht named after Lily, the thing that once made me proud, was taken away, not to make money, but to close a chapter. Part of the proceeds from the liquidation went to the neonatal intensive care unit. I didn't show up for photos. I didn't accept public thanks. I only asked them to use the money for children who still had a chance to live. I don't see that as atonement. I see it as a way to close a chapter of blood and tears by leaving something better behind for people who had nothing to do with it. Father and daughter left Los Angeles without ceremony. That city of sunshine no longer felt warm. It became distant, like a beautiful photograph tied to painful memories. We returned to Chicago, colder, grayer, but more real. Lily began therapy. Some days she talked a lot. Some days she said nothing. I didn't push. I learned how to be present without filling the silence with words. I went back to my old office, not to make more money. I had enough. I went back to remember, to make sure that every time I looked at contracts and numbers, I wouldn't forget the lesson that had been paid for with a life that never had the chance to be born. Money can be a tool, but without boundaries it can also become a blade that turns back on your own family. I want to make one thing clear before this story closes. The story in this video is fictional, inspired by real-life situations and human experiences, created to offer moral value, life lessons, and emotional reflection for viewers. It does not encourage extreme actions, does not promote violence, and does not target any real individual or organization. If there is anything worth keeping from this story, it's a few very simple reflections. Never ignore your instincts when someone makes you feel not right. Your body and intuition often recognize danger before your logic does. Money may blind others, but it cannot hide a person's true nature. It only reveals it more clearly. When you love someone, set clear boundaries, not just emotional ones, but legal, financial, and personal ones as well. And most importantly, speak up early. Seek medical help, legal help, and the support of someone you truly trust if you feel controlled or threatened. If you or someone you love find yourself in a similar situation, please don't endure it alone. Prioritize safety. Document unusual signs. Seek medical professionals when your body speaks up, and lawyers when your rights are violated. No one deserves to pay with their life just to preserve a relationship. I didn't tell this story to show off power or money. I told it because there are too many people out there who chose silence, until it was too late. If you're still listening right now, it means you care, and sometimes that care alone can be enough to save a life. If you're listening to this story from somewhere in the world, leave a comment and tell me where you're from. I read everyone, and I value that. If this story made you think, please press like so it can reach others who may need to hear it. And if you want to continue walking with me through stories about boundaries, family, and justice paid for with clarity, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for staying, for listening, and for not turning away from the truth.